what is dispersion? Dispersion, again, as I said, I showed you the chart in which I was interested in the deviation from the mean. So if this is the mean, then I am interested in what is the average deviation from the mean. Okay, both the sides. Doesn't matter if it's positive, doesn't matter if it's negative. So that is what is dispersion. Again, there are different ways to do that. One is the one in the easiest method is to just find out the difference between the maximum and the minimum values, and that is nothing but is called as the range. But that does not really give us any more information, because all it says is that the difference between the maximum value and the minimum value is range, right? If we use the multiplicative method, right, then we are looking at standard deviation method. If we are looking at arithmetic method, then we are looking at mean absolute deviation. Okay, you will get the idea once you actually calculate this. So it's better that we quickly shift into a spreadsheet. In the spreadsheet, now we want to find out the dispersion, right? So remember, we had two methods. One is the multiplicative method and one is the arithmetic method. So let's start with the multiplicative method, because that is the most important method, right? So we know that the mean is 0.56, right? We can clearly see that the mean is 0.56. Now we want to find out what is the distance between 26, each of these observations, from 0.56. So how do we find out? Simple. This every observation minus the mean, right? And let's see what exactly happens, right? Now the interesting thing that happens is when you actually find out the distance, right, and you sum it up. Let's say we want to find out the mean of the deviations from the center. The sum actually comes up to be 0, because it's obvious, right? Because if I have some set of observation positive from the mean and some set of observations negative from the distance from the mean, both should finally end up to 0. That's the reason why, because of the signs, right? Because you've got negative and then you've got positive, and both cancel each other out. So in order to remove the sign, in the multiplicative method, what we do is we square it. Okay, so get rid of the sign. So we got rid of the sign, and now we have the square distances from the mean. Okay, now here is where we want to find out the mean of the square deviations. Okay, so let's first sum the deviation, the squared deviations from the mean. Remember why we are squaring it? Just to get rid of the effect of negative signs. Okay, now let's look at the number of observations. So if I just do a count, again, it's not necessary that you have to use the spreadsheet, but if you want, you can, if you want a better understanding. So we've got about 36 observations. So I'm just going to do -1 since it's a sample. So that's about 35. Now, how do we calculate standard deviation, right? So since we squared it, now we need to unsquare it. So we're going to use a square root instead. Okay, so square root, right? So that's my square root out here. And we want to find out the square root of the sum of deviation, right? You have to be very careful out here what you are trying to find out the square root of. Okay, so if I just do square root of, let's say, the standard deviation, and then divide this by, let's say, the number of observation, which is what the formula says, my deviation comes up to be 0.1.114, right? And for the purpose of making sure that we are doing correct, I will also use this ready-made deviation formula, standard deviation, and see whether we get the exact same answer. Okay, so you can see that the answer is 0.65 or 6.5%, right? Now why is this happening? Because the square deviation has to be of both the values. Okay, so now if you see this answer, it exactly matches with even your formula. So the square root is for both the sum of deviation as well as the number of observations on the denominator, right? So that's the, you can say, the multiplicative method of finding. So what does 6.59.5% say? That the average distance of deviation from the center, the mean, is 6.595%. That is the meaning of it. Now what if we do not want to square? Let's say we want to use the additive method. So in that case, what we do is we find out the absolute deviation from the mean, or we get rid of the signs by ignoring the signs, not squaring the sign. Okay. So we take absolute. So we are ignoring the sign here. Okay. So we ignored the sign here, and let me put it into percentage values. Now see what happens. Now, since I've not squared it, I can use the same additive principle. So I'm just going to add it up. Right? And I'll just divide it by the number of observations. So that's my sum of deviations, and my n minus 1 is going to be same, and my mean absolute deviation is going to be sum of deviation divided by the number of observations. This is nothing but numbers. Yeah. So now my mean absolute deviation comes up to 4.42. Remember, the method differed because on how to ignore the sign. Now, if you did not unsquare this, right? So when we did the sum of deviations, if you just took the sum of deviations divided by, let's say, 35, then this is called as variance. And variance has actually no real applications because you can't really interpret variance. So that's the reason why you unsquare it and you use standard deviation as a measure. Okay. So this is standard deviation and mean absolute deviation. Range, you already understood, the maximum and the minimum difference in the value, right? Now let's look at something which is different from dispersion. I mean, you can't really call this as dispersion because dispersion we already calculated. But if we want to, let's say, understand the other way around, stating that how much of my dispersion or standard deviation am I taking for 1% of return that I'm getting, then that is nothing but coefficient of deviation. Actually, it's a risk to return ratio rather than actually a dispersion matrix. Okay, so an example is if you got 6.6 as the standard deviation, and if you divide it by the AN, then all you are saying is my risk is 11.71 times the return that I'm getting. That is what is coefficient of variation. Okay, so relationship between arithmetic mean and geometric mean, I don't see that this is very important in terms of the exam, but all you need to know is the relationship in terms of the effect. So the larger the variance is going to be, that means the larger the deviation from the mean, the larger is going to be the difference between the geometric mean and the arithmetic. And logically, why is this so? Because you know what, if you have larger deviations, okay, that means larger deviations would affect your arithmetic mean, which we understood already. And since the larger deviations are going to create outliers, right? So the outliers is going to make the arithmetic mean differ, but the geometric mean will not get affected by the outliers because it's finally just a rate calculation, right? So that's what the relationship you need to know. The larger the difference between arithmetic mean and geometric mean, majorly because of the outliers. Okay, now look at the issues with standard deviation. Okay, now you have to understand that standard deviation also is on finally the additive principle. Okay, I've plotted two data points out here. Same, everything is same apart from this one value out here, which is the outlier in case of return 1. Now, if you see, in reality, this is good because he actually generated higher return. The fund manager generated higher return. If you just did a straightforward standard deviation calculation, then the fund manager of the first returns looks pretty bad because his risk is very high, right? On the other hand, you've got returns 2 in which your standard deviation is low, but the returns are pretty low. But even if he's generating lower returns, his standard deviation seems to be better, right? So what is exactly happening is the standard deviation, since if you look at the chart, okay, you can draw it out here. If this is your distribution or your plotting of your returns, what is exactly happening is the person who is generating even the higher returns is getting penalized for the deviation. Well, in fact, you should actually get penalized for only the negative values. That's at least what the concept is, right? So the reason is, again, because finally it works on the principle of mean. Because even in case of standard deviation, you are summing up and dividing by n minus 1. So the effect is similar to what happens to the arithmetic mean. So the solution for that is to calculate downside deviation, in which you only look at a target return. Let's say you say that I only want to look at values or find out standard deviation of values below 6%. Or let's say in this case, we are saying that the target returns are 3%. So I am only interested on the deviations which are below minus 3%, right? So all the other values will have to ignore, right? So for example, this is my first target. So we're taking the same values in the previous sheet, and then we are just looking at a target deviation of minus 3%. And then if we calculate the deviation, then my deviation comes down for 2.14% from 25%. And for the second returns, now it is higher than the first one. It's about 2.68%. So of course, now the first fund manager looks better, but it's arguable whether even the higher returns which the fund manager has generated here should be considered as a good thing, because higher deviation always comes at a cost of risk. Touching upon normal distribution, generally, this has been talked about a lot, but all it means is that regular data like stock market return data, which have this feature of a bell, which appear to be linear, or you could say that it is more symmetric in nature, and that is what is called as a normal distribution. So stock market returns do follow normal distribution, and they're not perfectly normal, not identical exactly like a bell curve, but yes, they appear to be more symmetrical in terms of their shape. Okay, so now this is where we are discussing the shape of various distribution. Now, non-symmetrical, so I've actually attached a spreadsheet here. You can actually look at the hedge fund data. So here is the Nifty 50 distribution. This is how it looks. But this is how a hedge fund, specifically a CTA hedge fund, this is a commodities trading fund returns. If you plot that, it does not appear to be very symmetrical, and it appears something like this, right? Now, in the real world data, you will not either find something like this, or neither will you actually find this or this, because real market data can be very weird when they actually look, right? So this is how it actually looks in the real market data, right? But something to watch out is look at the specific structure of the distribution. You'll see that there is some significant negative values out here, and there are some bumps out here which you can also call it as frequent smaller losses, and then you have got these outlier big events happening. That does not really happen with the Nifty 50 equity distribution, right? So all you're trying to understand is the data can either be tilted towards the left. You can see this is how it is tilted to the left, or it can be tilted to the right, which means it has got frequent higher outlier events, right? And if somebody asks you, then how will the mean median mode be structured? Because since the distribution is like this, right, then you have got higher values out here, right, higher frequency, hence the mode is greater, or you could say that, so you have got the mode, the median, and mean in this order. And if you look at the negatively skewed data point, right, so this is the skew is this one, right, and this is the skew on the right hand side. We can see that again the data is structured from mean, median, and mode to the right? So and if you look at for the proper hedge fund data, you can clearly see that your mean is 0.407, which is higher, and your median is 0. Which is slightly lower than that, and the lowest is actually 0.106, which is the mode. Now, interpreting skewness, you really don't have to calculate skewness, but I've still calculated the skewness for the CTA and the Nifty. So you can see our CTA skewness is actually positive, but our Nifty skewness is actually negative, right? Which means if you see, this is negative skew, right? Larger, smaller outlier events to the negative side, which is true for Nifty 50 because Nifty 50 does tend to generate larger one day negative values, right? But the CTA fund does not, because if you look at the CTA distribution, it's got frequent smaller losses and larger gains, again infrequent, but extreme losses cases are not there. That's the reason why it does not really have you can say a negative skewness. Similar to skewness, when you're looking at left and right, uh, if you are looking at the the height of the distribution, then you're referring to kurtosis. Okay. Again, this formula is not required to be remembered, but all you need to remember really is for a perfect normal distribution, the kurtosis is equal to 3. So either if the kurtosis is more than 3, then that means it's taller, and if it is lesser than 3, that means it's smaller to the normal distribution. That's all that it means. But if you actually calculate this, Nifty actually has a kurtosis of 9, which is, that means it still has some significant value of fat tails, which means it can give you some frequent large losses. But the hedge fund actually has a negative 2.48 kurtosis, which means if it's less than 3, then you are basically saying thinner tailed distribution. Tail means this value, which are important from perspective of risk. Coming to the discussion on correlation. Now, remember we had plotted the scatter plot in which we are trying to understand what is the strength of, or how do two values or two assets move together. Whenever we are interested in understanding how these assets move or do not move together, then we are referring to correlation. For example, if you were to plot gold versus equity, you will see that when gold goes up, your Nifty might go down because they have an inverse relationship. And it makes sense also from the perspective of gold being a safe asset versus equity being a risky asset, right? So how do you calculate? But you have to be very careful that correlation does not mean causation. Okay, it means just an observation. Okay, so correlation finally gets used big time in portfolio management because you're trying to find out negatively or low correlated assets which you want to put it in a portfolio so that you get better diversification. Okay, so but how do you calculate correlation? So first you need to find out covariance. Okay, similar to standard deviation, if you see out here, all you're trying to do is, this is the observation, each value, just like standard deviation minus the mean, but then you multiply these together, okay, with again the deviation from the mean. Why do you multiply? The reason is because multiply is the only way by which you can preserve the relationship between x and y, and then you divide by the number of observations. So what you get at the end, the summation of this is what you call it as covariance, right? Now, if you want to derive correlation from this, because covariance again value will not make any sense, so you need a value which you can interpret in real life. So what you do is you use the covariance and then divide it by the standard deviation x and standard deviation y, right? And if you divide that, you might get answers anywhere between -1 to 0. -1 means negative correlation, which means something like gold. Gold goes up, where equity goes down. And you might get +1, which says a strong correlation. So Nifty 50 and let's say Nifty mid cap would almost be, similar relationship, right? Because both are equity. So then you would have a positive relationship out here. So that's what we know in terms of what we need to know in terms of correlation. Look at the uses of correlation. This is what I was talking about in terms of the correlation matrices, right? So you can, if you are a portfolio manager, you could actually, decide that what kind of sectors you want to also look at, specifically which are non-correlated, right? So for example, if you had, let's say capital goods, right? So you want to find out what is the correlation of capital goods with, let's say, healthcare. So you can just go out here and see that capital goods and healthcare have, zero point 0.5 correlation, right? Let's see any there are there any other sectors which have lesser correlation? Probably not. Probably FMCG, right? Then you can also try to see what is healthcare, which is the sector which has the lowest correlation with the healthcare sector, right? So again, you will see that probably it is oil and gas or power. So that helps a portfolio manager, a fund manager in deciding, also from the perspective of reducing the risk from the business cycles, right? Similarly, you can see indices and the respective correlation, but again, not much used. uh, Mostly either you used asset class correlation, asset one asset class with some other asset class, so gold versus nifty you might be interested in, right? Or you might look at sector correlation, right? And that brings us to the end of the second reading. It's fairly an easy reading, because mostly the questions which you might encounter in this reading are related to means, percentile, quantiles, and some bit of data related to some bit of questions related to questions being asked on which is the best visualization tools. But otherwise, I think this reading is pretty doable. The fun will start from the third reading, which is related to probability. So I'll see you in the next session. Bye.